Lisa, look at this as if it's we're investigating a crime, a caper, a mystery, okay? And this is part of the puzzle, right? It's one of those puzzle pieces. It's a clue. As somebody who would look at a case and investigate it objectively, your thoughts on Bruce Witkin? Because Johnny Depp could say, look, we had a falling out, and now he's just bitter, and he's testifying for my ex. So how do you look at his testimony?
I think all the eyeballs, including the jurors, are looking at this and saying, how credible is he? He's been with Johnny since 1984. They've had a long, enduring relationship where they partied together. He never said they abused drugs, but they partied because that's what the culture was. And then all of a sudden he was cut out of his life. So is this guy sore in some capacity? We have to look at that as a factor for him potentially saying things that may be damaging. However, he comes across as authentic. He comes across as somebody who is telling the truth, who is scarred and hurt that he no longer has a relationship with Johnny. And he knows probably has nothing to gain right now because he has been completely cut out of his life. So if you were trying to get points with Johnny to get back in, this is not the way to do it. However, I do think that the authenticity is coming through, and the jury is probably seeing that.
And you know what I think too, Lisa and Matt, we've heard, it seemed like the theme today was Johnny Depp cutting people out of his life. Tracy Jacobs, his former agent who had been with him since the beginning, and then also Bruce Witkin and the former business manager, the money man, Joel Mundell. So he severed ties with, it sounds like, quite a few people around the same time. Interesting. And I do think it does speed things up. It might not be as compelling to watch because you don't have somebody live in the courtroom. However, you see they cut out a bunch of chunks. You see the quick edits there. And so it does kind of keep things moving along. All right, Lisa, this is a great question for you. It comes from @CharlieHK83 on Twitter. Question, and we believe this is about the penthouse incident from May 21st of 2016, kind of really the seed from which all of this whole thing sprouted. Is it a crime not to report domestic violence for friends and people on site, especially with Amber and with her claiming that she feared for her life? I think that's a great question, Lisa. You take it from here.
It really is. And we also seen the domestic violence officer on the scene who talked about the way that the police officers handled it, and were they right in leaving and not making an arrest and not creating an actual report or taking photos of the alleged crime scene. So was something wrong with the police and how they handled it? And we're getting to find out if that's true or not. So is it a crime for the police officer to not take a report if there is domestic violence and there are witnesses there? Absolutely, it's a crime for a police officer not to do that. However, if you have a reluctant witness, there are ways to try and further the investigation because they are fearful, and it happens a lot of times in domestic cases. So you open the investigation, you leave the scene, and then you continue with the interview. But everybody on that scene should have been interviewed by the police officers to find out if there was cause, if there was a crime.
So, Lisa, do you think they did drop the ball then, the cops who responded, both sets? Because remember, there were two separate calls with 4 different officers, 2 sets of 2.
Right, and I did hear the testimony from them. So if the scene, there's a disarray in the house where you're compelled to take pictures to say, let's take this a little bit further, there was no indication of that. So the police officers did not make that incident report. So that's not to say they didn't tour every single room to find out. I don't know that. I don't know if that came forward or not. So they would be defunct if they did not take the crime scene pictures. And also they had an obligation to interview everybody there. Her friends were there. There were witnesses. But she was the one who ultimately said, nope, it was just verbal. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay. You take that with a grain of salt, but I still believe in writing a report, especially in high-profile cases when you know it's going to come full circle.
Yeah, and just I think it's important we point out too, I believe Officer Sines testified that they did a sweep of the whole penthouse. So she was one of the first 2 officers. She was that first pair They didn't have their body cameras. The second two did. All right, let's move on and take some questions. Lisa Lockwood on Twitch. This comes from 3FM7DB3. In regards to the LAPD domestic abuse deposition, my question is, what is the narrative the AH team is trying to portray? That the LAPD officers didn't do a good job in observing, investigating, reporting of the alleged abuse? That's the question. And what is the impact of this narrative? Perfect question for you, Lisa Lockwood.
Yes, because obviously the goal is to say that the police department failed in their duty. We have somebody who was a victim of a crime and they did not go forward with it. But what was interesting is when you pointed out that there was no way that they knew it was a celebrity at that address and they didn't even recognize Amber. So it's not about protecting a celebrity. They also have a unit specifically assigned to training on domestic violence to look to see if the alleged victim is trying to hide the abuse because they're still fearful of their offender. And that's when you would want to make sure that you follow up with the investigation and get the name of the offender, get the name of the husband. Who is he? Where are they? Let's get a telephone number and let's continue with the investigation. Because they did not do that, even with the training that they have, does not mean that they failed in their job. They arrived, they went there twice. As you said, they did a full sweep of the apartment, still did not find probable cause to notate this as a crime. So two different officers, two different times, dealing with the same people on the premises, still no sign of injury because they would have been obligated to take a photo of it, and they didn't do it. So yes, the idea is let's implicate LAPD, say that they were negligent in their job and in their work, and Amber was truly a victim in that situation.
And Officer Sines, I believe her testimony was that she was trained in investigating domestic violence. So, and I think she had a newbie kind of police officer with her that day. So, yeah, they said they didn't know who Amber Heard was. They didn't know it was her. Io Tillett Wright is the one who called 911, her friend. They didn't know Johnny Depp lived there. They didn't know it was his apartment. So, you know, I think thinking everybody was circling the wagons to protect Johnny Depp, I'm not sure that's going to go anywhere. Lisa Lockwood, Hollywood Christian Carino says will put up with divas and drugs. They won't, according to Richard Marks, put up with domestic violence and sexual assault allegations. So your thoughts on the difference between the testimony of Christian Carino, Depp's former agent, and Tracy Jacobs, Depp's former agent? Because Tracy Jacobs says it was the drugs and the being late. Christian Carino said they knew what they were getting, and they kind of accommodate for that. They make plans for that. They you know, that's what it is. What it is, basically.
Right. And the question that I would say for Tracy Jacobs is, the last 10 years that you said he was late to set and the complaints continued, he was never fired from a job, and he continued to get work in those 10 years with that diva kind of character. So they still were offering him films, and they just realized that's going to be part of our loss on set, that we're going to be paying all of the crew extra money because he will be late. So I think that that's what they'd been dealing with it. And when Johnny did his full sweep with letting everybody go, you better believe somebody who had been in his life and helping his career for close to 30 years, as you mentioned, is going to be sore about it. He made her work a little bit hard in those last 10 years, allegedly. And, you know, now she's not reaping the benefits of any money, future money that would come to Johnny, because I think potentially when this is all said and done, if it is proven that he was not the aggressor in these domestic assaults, that the money will continue to come in and she won't be able to collect any of it.